Hi, online Math D students. I wanted to do a quick video to show you how to show work when a problem like that comes up in your homework, which it will occasionally. Not a ton of problems have show work, or not a ton of problems did I enable the show work process, but I do want you to show work on some of the problems, especially because we have a proctored final exam, and I want to be able to see what your work looks like while you're working at home so that I can give you some feedback as to what I expect to see when you're actually doing a proctored exam, like the final exam. So we have our first show work problems coming up in 1.3, and they have to do with graphing. In fact, that's the majority of the problems that I have you show work on. Are actually graphing problems, and you should be showing work regardless of whether I'm asking you to show me that work, because you want to keep everything very organized in a binder so you have something to go back and look at. You don't want to be doing your work on a bunch of different pieces of little scratch paper, entering in the answers into my math lab, and then checking the scratch paper out, because then when you come to a quiz or a test, or at the end of the semester the proctored final exam, you won't have all those little sheets of paper to study from. So you want to organize yourself and do all of that work in a binder. And then for a handful of problems, I have asked you in my math lab to actually show me some work. So I'll go through the ways in which you can show me that work. It can be as easy as just taking a picture and then uploading the image into my math lab, and then I can take a look at that through my math lab. You can take a picture and email it to me. You can scan it and send it to me that way. You can fax it and send it to me through fax. You can even put it into an actual envelope with a stamp and send it to me that way. So we have lots of options for the show work. I think probably the easiest one would be just to take a quick picture and show it to me that way. Oh, I forgot, actually, there is also a feature in my math lab in the show work frame where you can actually use your mouse to show the work, which is a little bit clunky, but you can absolutely do it that way too and submit it that way. So I just wanted to show you how you actually would show work on a particular problem. So the problem that I have here is from Math D section 1.3, and this is within the problem. I think it was number 5, if I remember correctly, that I printed out. I actually printed it out so that you could see what it looks like. So this is what it would actually look like on your screen. You'd have this problem, and then a separate window will open up that says show work. So if you want to show work for a problem like this, so this problem says find 7 ordered pairs for this particular equation, y equals the absolute value of x minus 8, using the given values of x, and then determine its graph. So if I want to show work, what I'm going to actually do here is I'm going to take each of these x values, I'm going to plug them into the equation, and then I'm going to solve. So for example, for the first one, so when x equals -3, I'm going to plug that right into the equation. Y equals the absolute value of -3 minus 8. And since we're taking the absolute value, that's actually asking me to find the distance of -3 away from the origin. So the absolute value of -3 is actually +3. So the corresponding y value would be +3 minus 8, and +3 minus 8 is actually -5. So -5 is what I would put in here for my first answer. And then I would continue. I would continue to do this. I'd continue to show the work. So for each of the x values, I'm going to continue to plug those in to the y values, absolute value of -2 minus 8. So y is equal to 2 minus 8. Ooh, jumped ahead there. 2 minus 8, so y is equal to -6. Also notice that I'm actually using a pencil to do this work rather than a pen. So if I do make a mistake, I can easily either erase it or just adjust. And then x equals -1, so y equals the absolute value of -1 minus 8. Y equals 1 minus 8, so y equals -7. So I can put -7 into my table. Now for 0, 0 is 1. Actually, maybe you wouldn't have any work. And I wouldn't mark you down wrong if you didn't show any work, because plugging 0 into this equation would be fairly simple. The absolute value of 0 is 0, so then 0 minus 8, you would end up with just -8 here. And then we can do it for 1. So when x equals 1, y equals the absolute value of 1 minus 8. So we end up with y equals 1 minus 8, which is equal to -7. So we've ended up with -7 for our table, so we plug in -7 when x equals 2. Y equals the absolute value of 2 minus 8. So y would be equal to 2 minus 8. Y would be -6. So I plug -6 into my table, and our last one, we'll squeeze it. Well, let's go ahead and put it over here. So we'll put it up here. I've used up this whole piece of paper. X equals 3, so then y would be the absolute value of 3 minus 8. Y would be equal to 3 minus 8, or y would be -5. So then I have my set of ordered pairs here. -3, -5, -2, -6, -1, -7, 0, -8, 1, -7, 2, -6, and 3, -5. Now I need to see, now in my math lab, it says determine the graph, and I just have 4 options to select from. So this is one of the reasons why it would be good to have you show work on this problem, because rather than having a multiple choice problem on the final, I would actually want to see, can you graph these ordered pairs and come up with a graph of an equation? So rather than doing this, if we actually grab another piece of paper, I'm going to put the camera down for just 1 second so I'm not shaking it around. If I grab an actual piece of graph paper, or just any piece of paper would do as well. If I actually grab a piece of graph paper, what I can do now is I can create an axis, coordinate system, with an x and a y axis, and I can graph these points. A ruler would have been a lot better, but at least I have the graph paper. So once I have my graph paper and my grid set up, I can put my x-axis here, my y-axis here. We do want to label our graphs. We always want to label our axes and label the scale. I'm sorry, this is a little bit clunky with this particular camera. We always do want to actually label our scale. So in each direction, make sure you tell me what is the scale. So if I'm going to use 1 unit in each direction for 1 tick mark, then I would want to indicate that. So the positives going up, negatives going to the left, negatives going down, and I'm doing 3, but give me at least 2 on each axis. So once you've got your coordinate system sort of laid out, you can start to plot your points. So the points we had were -3, -5. So -3, -5 would be right here. -3, -5. And then I'm going to graph -2, -6. So -2, -6 would be right here. And then I'm going to graph -1, -7, which would be right here. And 0, -8. And this particular graph had quite a bit of symmetry involved, meaning if I were to actually fold this graph along the y-axis, it actually was symmetric. So the points are going to start to show up, start to head back up on this side of the y-axis. So then we had 1, -7, 2, -6, and 3, -5, plotting all my points. And you can see here, now I can actually connect the dots. If you had a ruler, you could do a ruler to get a very straight line. But you can see my graph here, and of course there was a matching one from my math lab. So in my math lab, you would pick the one that matches. So looking at the options, it of course would be this option here. So this is what you would actually pick in my math lab. But then in the window where it says show work, what you could do is you could actually take a picture of your work. I made the work large and did it all on this page and then in a separate graph. So you could take 2 pictures, you could scan both images, whatever is easiest for you. But my expectations when you show work is just so that I can get a sense of what you're doing in your notebook as you're working through these problems. And I can actually give you some feedback as to, make sure I can tell you, make sure that you include a scale if you've forgotten the scale. Or if you've made a mistake in the signs over here, I can say, watch out for the signs. When you're taking the absolute value, it means the distance. So the absolute value of -3 would be +3. So it just gives me an opportunity to provide some feedback. So that's what I'm looking for. If you have any questions, feel free to email me and I will answer them as quickly as I can. Okay, thank you.